John, you've been sneezing and coughing persistently for the past 3 days.
Mary, I am tired. I don't know what else to take. I have taken all the cough syrups I can lay my hands on and they are not just working.
Haven't you heard of Muson cough syrup?
Muson? Yes. Muson cough syrup provides fast relief for cough, cold and catarrh, and
John,
it's good for babies.
You've been sneezing and coughing persistently for the past 3 days.
Mary, I am tired. I don't know what else to take. I have taken all the cough syrups I can lay my hands on and they are not working.
Haven't you heard of Muson cough syrup?
Yes. Muson cough syrup provides fast relief for cough, cold and catarrh, and it's good for babies.
Sneezing and coughing persistently for the past 3 days. John, you've been sneezing and coughing persistently for the past 3 days.
Mary, I am tired. I don't know
on mute. Yeah, can't hear anybody.
Good afternoon, Prof.
Good morning from Atlanta. How are you, Prof?
We're good.
Nice to see you again after several years.
It is such a pleasure.
Last time was on Francolisa in Washington, D.C. No, I mean in Abuja, when I came with President Clinton.
That is our boy. That's great. Well done. Welcome.
It's been a long time.
Yes, it has been.
God bless.
Okay, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi is also all ready.
Professor Bolaji is on.
Yeah.
How are you, sir? I think he probably didn't hear you.
Okay.
How are things going on in Nigeria?
In Nigeria, we are thankful. We're taking it one day at a time.
Very good, very good.
Yeah. Lovely.
And I see the Climate Innovation Center on your campus going strong too.
Yeah, yes, indeed. There's some very serious-minded people working on those things.
No
Thank
problem.
God they don't have to contend with dim-witted folk like me. You know, it's nice to have all these smarter young people getting things done.
They're still following your footsteps. Follow.
Yeah, lovely. Okay.
Prof, congratulations. Congratulations, Prof. This is Chris.
Good morning, Ambassador Ayolukani.
Good afternoon. Very, very distinguished special guests, panelists, dear friends, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege for me to welcome you to another in our series on Nigerian history. And perhaps just to refresh us a little bit about why we run this series and how far we have come. Now, this idea came about a year or so ago when I was shocked to find out that many of our young people know very little about the history of our country. And as George Santayana told us all so long ago, if we don't know our history, we run the grave danger of repeating its errors. And so we thought that it would be a good thing for our young people if we had a series of conversations with notables that have been part of our history, for them to share with us from their experience, from their study, and all that, insights into Nigerian history. Our expectation is that these insights will help our young be better equipped to navigate the future. Because as is a dictum mantra of mine, I believe that every generation has a duty, has an obligation to make the shoulders available for the next generation to stand on so that they can see tomorrow more clearly. We're extremely privileged today as we turn from several other subjects. Last time out, a fortnight ago, we had as our subject matter, traditional rulers, continuity and change in Nigeria. And we had our country's leading traditional rulers with us. We had what I thought was a remarkable innovation of some young women regents who gave true life to that conversation. And before that, we had dealt with issues like politics, restructuring, people like Dr. Umar Lazu. We had dealt with opposition politics, looking at NEPU, with people like Alhaji Tanko Yakasai. We had dealt with just a variety of subject matter, corruption, public-private sector, and we had the privilege of Doctors Michael Omolayole and Christopher Kolade, and supported ably in the leitmotif segment, as we call it, by people like Dr. Waziri, Farida Waziri, Ayo Obe, Sojia Pampa, and others. Now today we turn to a very, very important subject. Particularly important because at this time in our history, there's a lot of talk, a lot of conversation about where we are as a country in terms of our foreign policy. Just this morning, one of the newspapers was reporting the challenges of Nigerians in, I believe, the Congo, where our mission has literally been sacked and all kinds of things. We've dealt very lately with things that have happened to even our own diplomatic mission building in Ghana. And we've had all kinds of other problems around the world. And the question is, what has happened to Nigerian foreign policy? We are extremely, extremely pleased that we have to lead us in this conversation. A number of gentlemen who have left their own mark on the evolution and development of Nigerian foreign policy. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi needs absolutely no introduction. The thing about Nigeria is when they say a man needs no introduction, it means that the next 2 hours is spent introducing him. But as we know, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi has been our foreign minister. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi has been Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi has been a statesman of high note and regard. And he leads our conversation today. We have also on this call Ambassador Bagudu Hershey, who was also a Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we have also joining us, and I can see several of them on my monitor, several ambassadors, former Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, External Affairs. The name keeps changing. I'm not quite sure which one it is at any point in time. Dr. Martins Omoibi, who has been ambassador, who has been Permanent Secretary. We have Ambassador Ayo Lukomi, who is smiling very broadly after his mission in several places, including Australia, now helps gird the loins, as it were, for Nasima. And we have the author of Precarious Balancing himself, Professor George Obiozo, ambassador to the United States of America, Israel, and so on and so forth. And we have Ms. Nkoyo Toyo, who has also served as ambassador to give us a perspective of the non-career ambassador. It's a great, great honor and privilege to have all of you on this conversation today. But let me begin by asking Professor Bolaji Akinyemi to help us set the stage. Now, the first salvo in the evolution of Nigerian foreign policy post-independence as we know it really came when Nigerian students protested against the Anglo-Nigeria Defense Pact. Today, grand old conservative men like Elder Felix Ohiwere were amongst those who were demonstrating in Ibadan at UI and were arrested and all of that in their protest against the Anglo-Nigeria Defense Pact. From then, foreign policy has gone through seasons of what Professor Obiozo will call precarious balancing in terms of relations with Israel and so on and so forth. But I think that I want to put as kicker for this conversation something that happened about 16 years ago. I know that, I don't know if he has joined, but he's joining us. This conversation will be another ambassador as a participant. Good News Igali. Ambassador Igali was ambassador in Sweden when about 16 years ago, I attended a special session of CIPRI. CIPRI is the Stockholm Peace Research Institute. It was actually a contract for the United States government that brought together global thought leaders to look at what America does every 5 years, do a survey of the world and the way things were. Now, that was the first after the one of 2000 that indicated that Nigeria, if it continued down the track it was traveling, could within 15 years be actually called a failed state or be a failed or failing state. Of course, that global trend survey by the United States was, in my view, much misunderstood by public opinion and policymakers in Nigeria. And many people say that the US said that Nigeria will break up by 2015, which is not what the document said. It just said that the way Nigeria was traveling, within 15 years, it could be a failed state if things were not done. Anyway, this successor global trend survey, CIPRI got the invitation to host these global thought leaders. I had the good fortune of being one of those invited. I think I was the only person actually from sub-Saharan Africa. But the point was that during the course of the meeting of these global leaders, including a couple of former European prime ministers, one global statesman, whose name I don't know if it's fair or proper to mention because these are, even though it's been a long time, but these are really Chatham House rules kinds of meetings, said that Nigeria had become strategically irrelevant. He said that 20 years ago, no world power could venture into Africa without thinking for a minute how Nigeria would react. But that today, no world power would really bother if it was going to the next door neighbor of Nigeria's. So, very long introduction. Professor Bonaji Akinyemi, very kindly, how has our foreign policy evolved that has taken it from the point we started to where we now are?
Thank you very much for, as you said, that long introduction. When I got your invitation and I saw the way the title was couched, the rise, fall, and ... of Nigerian foreign policy, I was happy with the physiology of the title, but then I haven't been able to come up with a better physiology. Now, the reason is that the title focuses on a part and not on the whole. If I were supervising a PhD thesis by a student on Nigeria itself, I will accept the title that Nigeria, the rise, fall, and ... And that came up in your introduction because your introduction focuses on the totality of Nigeria. And I will have asked the students to break up that title into rise and fall of leadership, rise and fall of economy, rise and fall of values, rise and fall of education, and of course, rise and fall of foreign policy. In essence, we've got to see the foreign policy as a sector of the totality of what has happened to Nigeria. And a further confirmation is the fact that it is the same ministry, the same institution of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which has served Balewa, Ironsi, Gawan, Murtala Muhammad, all the heads of states that have ruled this country. At times, it is the same personnel. In fact, until the purge in the ministry under Buhari, the first time he came, it was the same people who served all these heads of states. And yet, the policies changed. The articulation of the policies changed under these same people. In other words, foreign service officers are the quintessence obedient servants. You tell them what you want done, and they do it. Therefore, what we should be looking at are the factors responsible for the changes that take place in our foreign policy. I have interacted with the ministry under 4 categories or 4 stages of my life. As a student, because I was a federal government scholar, so the embassy or high commission had to take care of me, had to interact with the officers at that level, as a lecturer in the university, as DGNI, and finally, as a minister. And let me say, I can pay unflinching tribute to the caliber and gravitas of the men and women who have worked and are still working in that service. Now, I don't know how you are structuring the conversation, because what I would have liked to do now is to go through the factors that affect the changes in our foreign policy. So, Mr. Moderator.
Please go ahead. I would like you to go through those factors, but first of all, if you could lower the, so we can see more of you and less of the books on top of you, just lower the camera a little bit, just so that they can. I mean, we see your face, but we'd like to see a lot more of it than the books.
Well, the books are better looking than me.
That is your judgment.
Now, let me see if I can.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that better?
Yes, that's great. Yes, much better.
Oh, all right. Now, factors that affect changes in the foreign policy. One is the focus and the vision of leadership. The focus and vision of whoever is the head of state. Firstly, will be his ideological disposition. If he's conservative, like Balewa was, the foreign policy will reflect that conservative orientation. And that was what I meant earlier by saying, tell the ministry what you want done. And as bureaucrats, they will implement that. They may, if you seek their advice, they may very politely, very diplomatically let you know perhaps it will serve Nigeria's purpose better if you allow the policies to tilt this way. But the decision is taken by the head of state. So that's the first factor, ideological disposition. The second factor, of course, is the health disposition. We have suffered almost in the past 12 years from heads of state who really could not focus properly on our foreign policy, the intricacies of the foreign policy. I was reading just 2 days ago a dispatch sent by the last British Governor General of Nigeria, Sir John Robertson. And something struck me there. He said Balewa was normally a very courteous, reserved personality who did not like to offend, but could be firm when he wanted to. But he said, as the circumstances of Nigerian domestic policies imposed on him, and the Ramadan fasting increased that extra pressure, that the prime minister became a totally different person, pugnacious, at times offensive, which normally he wasn't. Now, I said that as an example of what I meant by the health dispensation. If you look at what happened to us under President Yar'Adua, a normally cautious and focused president. But as his health disintegrated, he lost that focus. And I give you just one illustration. I was a member of the Uwais Electoral Reform Committee. When we submitted our report to him, in his acceptance, he said, I accept your recommendations and I will implement this report. Now, as somebody who, if I can claim without being arrogant, had some experience with how governments deal with reports, I was taken aback by the fact that he would say he will accept and implement a report he hasn't read. And yet that's what he said. In fact, I thought maybe our chairman, Justice Uwais, had briefed him about what was in the report. But Justice Uwais assured me afterwards that he hadn't briefed him. And when I had the opportunity to meet with the president on another matter, I said, sir, it's unusual for government to pledge implementation of a report without reading that report. He said, I trust the caliber of the people on that panel. That's why I said so, and I mean it. I have now been told off the record, and this is the first time I will say this publicly because it's so many years have gone by.
Right.
The first time he then took the report to cabinet. I understand, I've been told that he told the cabinet, I've gone through this report and I accept the report and I intend to implement this report. He then asked for views of his cabinet members. Pat, you tell me what cabinet member is going to say, I disagree with you, Mr. President. None, it doesn't work that way. So everybody, everybody said, we agree, we agree, we agree, we support, good, passed. Then I understand that that night, PDP movers and shakers led by Anene went to him and said, Mr. President, you can't accept this report. Look at this. This is the way we win elections.
Win elections,
You've
yes.
just given away all of this. This report was written by people who have never run in their life for any office. They don't have the practical experience. No, sir, this will not work. And the man was briefing me was very close to President Yaradua. Actually, President Yaradua fell asleep in the process of the confrontation with them. And when they then kept quiet, he who was there kind of nodded in that. So he said, okay, I'll take the report back to cabinet tomorrow, which he did. And he now told them that they should really tell him.
What's wrong with the report?
Honestly,
yes.
What's wrong with the report?
Yes.
And everybody rejected that report. And that's why till today, that report had not seen the light of day. However, 3 days ago or so, again, I'm using it as an illustration, short one. I understand the president signed a new police act. Now, one of our recommendations in order to safeguard security at election purposes was to give the IG security of tenure. We put it there, when he's appointed, you should say for how many years. And if you are then going to remove him, it should be with 2/3 of the vote of the Senate.
The Assembly.
And that 2/3 must include at least 10 votes from the opposition. Now, in the new Police Act, now they've given him a 4-year tenure, a fixed tenure. So the president cannot wake up one day into a second year and say, I'm firing, I'm changing the IG.
Yes.
So what has really happened is that they are taking, little bits and pieces of of the report.
Yes.
We recommended, by the way, proportional representation so that women participation, representation can come close to the Beijing formula, quota for it. So, but I've just given you one illustration of how the health of, the head of
the leader
state
can affect policy choice and process.
The third is the personality disposition. And here I must be diplomatic. I mean, after all, you are talking about Nigerian foreign policy. If you have a president who is driven by ego, is likely to do a few things which have relevance to your topic of today. The first is that if he wants to be recommended for the Nobel Peace Prize, he will be more interested in going around the world trying to please other heads of state without consideration for Nigerian national interests.
Yeah, being very diplomatic, and I appreciate your diplomacy.
Thank you. Thank you. My grandchildren are still young. So that's the first thing that will happen, an ego trip. Second thing is, he may put in the ministry foreign ministers who are more like post offices. Carry this message here, carry that message here, rather than foreign ministers who could say, look, I need a policy paper on this particular issue, recommendations from your ministry on what we should do and how we should do it. No, he doesn't want to hear from the ministry. He has his own ideas. So the minister is just there to be a postmaster. Now that's not on. And this is why I said earlier that I pay tribute to the people who sat with me. Ask them, and I know you have access to all the retired ones. They will tell you, I welcomed debate. I mean, we had a policy planning department. It was more like a seminar in a university. Even people could understand that I encouraged them to talk to their minister that way. And when I got to the ministry and they started, you know, Your Excellency, I said, no, stop that. I was appointed on the radio. They will remove me on the radio. The only one thing they cannot take away from me is the title professor. I earned that. And that is why I insisted on just being called professor all through my tenure there in office. If you do that, you will get the best out of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But if I had gone there and said, I'm the minister, it is what I say that goes, I will be shortchanging Nigeria, and that will not be good for our national interest. So the fourth point is this competing subnational interests in the determination of foreign policy. How best to put this? I'd accept that Nigeria is a state of nationalities with interests that stretch north to the Sahara, your boundary with Cameroon and Co, and your boundary with Benin Republic, Togo, all the way to Ghana. Not to talk, of course, about your relationship with the ocean. Laugh at that, because you know, and Professor Obiozo, I'm happy it's on this
I'm
program.
going to get to him in a second to talk about precarious balancing.
Oh, thank you. You know, how far your economic exclusive zone goes, especially when you are a state with boundary with the ocean, is an extremely important issue under United Nations arena. Now, if I don't want to give you specific illustrations from my own experience about how, if you don't balance the subnational interests carefully, you will shortchange Nigeria. I'm sure George, my brother,
especially about Israel and the Arabs and all of those kinds of issues.
Exactly. But please come home. Do you remember the competition over who becomes OAU Secretary General?
Obu.
Amun said under whose regime that we had an Nigerian Secretary General who practically all heads of states wanted them confirmed, but Nigeria did not want him confirmed. And so we lost that post. I won't say more than that on that issue.
No, you're a diplomat and you should not.
So these are the factors that you've got to balance out. And if one of those factors goes astray, your foreign policy will go astray. So in conclusion, sir, I am not pessimistic, but I am concerned at the effect of cleavages on survival of the state. And the papers have been full of what I call cleavages in the past 1 week. Credible Nigerians have drawn attention to those cleavages. If you have no state, you will have no foreign policy. If your state continues to wobble, your foreign policy will continue to wobble. I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so very much. We're going to come back to you, obviously, but I'd like to see if I can find Professor George Obiozo on the call and to ask him to please just pick up from there in terms of the balancing. Ambassador George Obiozo has served as ambassador in Israel, has served ambassador in the United States of America, but very importantly, Okay. I think his line is fractured. I just talked to him, but maybe we'll just continue down that track, and I'll bring in Ambassador Martin Zahomoebi to speak to that. I know that Ambassador Hershey is also struggling with his technology. Has he come on? He spoke to me while you were speaking. But Ambassador Martin Zahomoebi is also an academic and a career officer in the ministry. So, my very dear brother, could you just pick up from there and engage us on the impact of internal domestic politics on foreign policy? What Professor Biozo very, very elegantly describes sometimes as the politics of precarious balancing.
Out.
Okay. Bring your set the screen a little further towards you so that we can see. Aha, a little more. Great. Aha. You know we love your bow tie.
Thank you very much. My mentor has just spoken, and it appears that you have conspired to make sure that I follow him immediately. Thank you very much, Pat. And Prof, I salute you, and many of my brothers, colleagues, and friends are all here. So it's such a pleasure and a privilege to be here this afternoon. Actually, I have taken the trouble to write something. So let me bore you and read it, because I may not be as diplomatic as my mentor, who he's really done an amazing work here. So I have actually put what I meant to say in writing. So do you mind if I just read it? It's very short,
okay,
actually.
Go ahead.
All right. I said, for many Nigerians who bore witness to the glory days of Nigerian foreign relations, these must be unfamiliar, even harrowing times that we are going through at this time. I almost cannot sleep every day. I wake up and I see the way we are treated, from xenophobic attack in South Africa to the pulling down of our High Commission in Ghana, and all these things. My heart just bleeds. Then for some of us who have been, at one time or the other, part of fairer climes of Nigeria's diplomatic history, today's situation is nothing short of traumatic. For me as an individual, I only spent 30 years in the diplomatic service, not like Ayo, who did 35, or Shola did 35, or other great guys who are there who did 35. I did 30. But I also saw many things, from first secretary to permanent secretary. For me as an individual, I shudder in astonishment at the kind of ridicule our national image has been put through, particularly in the past 2 years. This is why I am very delighted to participate in this conversation organized by the ever thoughtful, ever analytical, ever patriotic Professor Pat Utomi. And the topic, the rise and fall and 3 dots of Nigeria's foreign policy, filling the blank spaces. And I will be doing that towards the end of my paper. And the topic, the rise and fall of Nigeria's foreign policy, even in its grand subtlety, is eloquent and speaks unequivocally to the present unacceptable situation. I also thank Prof, who has just spoken, and others who will speak after him, all of whom are professional brethren, for finding time to attend to an important national issue such as this. One does not have to be an expert global analyst or a professor of international relations to realize that there is at the moment an embarrassing, unprecedented decline in Nigeria's international reputation. These are surely not those times in the 1960s when Nigeria led an emergent post-colonial continent, and from the front to impose and impress the dignity of the African person on the international platform. This was not the same Nigeria which began its continental and global peacekeeping brokering enterprise, for which it would become legendary when it was barely out of colonial domination This was hardly the Nigeria that earned itself the well-deserved appellation of the giant of Africa in the process of bringing its stupendous internal strengths to bear in matters concerning Africa and indeed the world. As a young diplomat in the early 1980s and 1990s, I was part of the team that drove the final nail into the coffin of apartheid in South Africa at the United Nations and returned the country to its original owners in the democratic order. Of course, the leader of that team was our eminent Professor Ibrahim Gambari, who received Nigeria's the highest South African national honor for a foreigner by virtue of the incomparable Nigerian contribution to the liberation of that country. Even before Professor Gambari came on board, it was like the task to end the fascist regime in South Africa was out of global consensus, literally handed over to Nigeria. For no fewer than 5 Nigerians had previously chaired the United Nations Special Committee Against Apartheid between 1972 and 1990. This list includes Ogebe Ogbu, Leslie Harriman, Akpore de Klerk, Maita Masule, Major General Garba. Of course, after apartheid was dismantled, Nigeria received a huge ovation from a grateful world, and the South Africans pledged their eternal indebtedness. In the light of what we see today as the very unfair treatment of Nigeria by South Africa, I'm not sure that our many sacrifices for these brother African countries, as deeply etched in our foreign policy, still count for very much. No other African country has bled for Africa, and indeed the world at large, the way Nigeria has done by way of commitment to global peace, harmony, and progress. Nigeria is one of the very few countries that have never gone to war against any nation. Rather, we have died for peace in other nations. We have been virtually everywhere, from Liberia, Sierra Leone, to Rwanda, from Congo to Kosovo, from Somalia to Sierra Leone, from Sudan to Ivory Coast. Just name it. What this means is that we do not in any way deserve the type of treatment we are receiving today, especially from our African brothers. As we are being embarrassed, maligned, and persecuted in South Africa, we are being insulted and dragged about by our close neighbors, Ghana. At the moment, we are subject of immigration sanctions and visa bans from the West, particularly US. At this point of global ignominy, I should say, we do not need specialists to interpret the character of our international decline to us. So how do we begin to rationalize the sudden collapse of the impressive international profile we painstakingly built over the decades, and at colossal human and material resource costs? Yes, we may have been faithful to the project of playing a leading role on the African continent and in the West African sub-region as enshrined in our foreign policy. Yes, we may have played our role in the promotion of international cooperation for the consolidation of universal peace and mutual respect. But there is always a nexus between internal stability and external influence, and that is what Nigeria has displayed even in these precarious times. It appears to me that what has eroded our dignity and integrity internationally stems from our lack of capacity to sort out the myriad maladies of our contemporary national existence. Without getting too much into detail, it is improbable that Nigeria has ever been this confused, apparently without direction, insecure, and divided at any other time in its peacetime history. I do not reckon, and I'm a historian. To put it in plain language, our brother African countries no longer see enough in us to grant us the respect we hitherto had enjoyed. They now read us as a bogus spent force with hardly any leadership will. How come? To stem the tide of international indignities and seeming collapse of our foreign policy, we have to look inwards and deeply too. There are too many leaky roofs in the home front, and this is where the clamor for restructuring comes alive and finds relevance. Indeed, in this time, it is a little relief that there is now a review of the 1999 Constitution. I have myself done a web conference on this among scholars and diplomats to look at the Constitution review of 1999. And in my submission, in my institute submission to the Senate committee, we made it very clear that that Constitution was a 419. because it said in its preambular paragraph, we, the people of Nigeria. I am not aware that that document represents the wishes and received the consultations of the ethnicities and groups that make up this great country, Nigeria. So the premise is faulty, and we have to find a way to address that to begin with, so that there can be a credibility to the document that we claim as ours. And our submission was very, very clear that this going round and round in circles have gone on for too long. We have a job that was cut out for us and has been done by this country. Huge costs. Eminent scholars were brought together in 2014, and that conference touched on literally every aspect of our national life. Why has the conference report of 2014 been relegated to the background? I thank Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, who was a catalyst, who was at the center of that historic conference, and the incredible report that was produced by that conference. Why can't we have a look at that instead of beginning a new process all the way that jettisons that? Even some of our foreign policy crisis points are dealt with almost resolutely in that document. Now, to stem the tide of international indignities and seeming collapse of our foreign policy, we have to look inwards and deeply too, as I said. There are too many leaking roofs in the home front, and this is where the clamor for restructuring comes alive and finds relevance. The present national structure has simply not worked. That goes without saying. Just a few days ago, there was a huge protest march in London where the OPC, the Oduwa People Congress, sang secessionist songs. You can't be singing that there is no one Nigeria in London, and you are trying to run a coherent foreign policy that projects, promotes, and defends one Nigeria. Even though it is not definitive, it calls it to question. And add to this what we have suffered in the hands of the IPOB and their Biafran agitation. And you'll be surprised if we are regarded as a proper country by the international community at this time. There has never been a more acute need for constitutional amendment in the entire history of this nation as at the present time. Why? And gratefully, the primary source of Nigeria's foreign policy is the Constitution, whose 1999 edition is now in dire need of far-reaching review. I've already spoken about that. To conclude, there is nothing inherently wrong with the Nigerian spirit, especially as expressed in individual character. A Nigerian is Justice Minister in Canada at this time. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is pulling mighty strings in her steady march towards the presidency of the World Trade Organization. Akinwumi Adesina has just made all of us proud at the African Development Bank. Goodluck Jonathan is building peace in Mali, and so many bold strides being taken by Nigeria across the country on their own individual cognizance. Nigeria is a swell pool of talented people, brilliant people, sufficient to drive any country. But there is nearly everything wrong about, I dare say, about our political structure. And until this is fixed, we will still remain immensely vulnerable to international indignity. And perhaps one can say challenges at this time. Having stressed the above, the present parallel situation of Nigerian foreign relations cannot be seen as definitive, irretrievable, foreclosed failure from a core diplomatic point of view. And I do not want to say that is the case. We have mentioned that there is an unbreachable connection between the domestic situation and external relations. While the overhauling of our internal political structures is expected to ameliorate many of our domestic challenges, there is need to rejig our foreign ministry. Thank goodness, a bill is now in the Senate or in the National House on setting up a Foreign Service Commission. This is long overdue. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Nigeria cannot be run like a parastatal. It is the arm of government with the statutory responsibility for the conduct and management of Nigeria's foreign relations. But what have we had? We've had quacks. I don't know what the present ratio is in the ambassadorial list, but it's close to 30% career, 70% career, non-career. We are competitors and we are judged by global standards. We are aiming to compete with South Africa and Egypt in Africa. What is the percentage of our budget for funding the foreign ministry? Not up to 1%. And you are competing with South Africa that uses close to 3% of its national budget. Egypt perhaps even has more. So we have the Foreign Service Commission needs to be established as a matter of priority for the foreign ministry. We need to stop meddlers and quacks from becoming experts overnight. And politicians who haven't quite made it in their wards are compensated by huge ambassadorial appointment to Canada, to Washington, and to the United Nations. And people who have spent all their life in the foreign ministry, 35 years, 30 years, are reduced to Burundi and Togo. And if they are not so lucky, they become deputy heads of mission. Now, what that does, and please don't get angry with me for saying this, because I am just trying to say my own piece. Perhaps this is the only country that does that among those who aspire to be leaders. We must put square pegs in square holes or round pegs in round holes. If we aim to have a best team, we must put our very best and competent forward. You do not put a police officer to take charge
very much for
brigade.
this excellent
So,
presentation.
Let me
so you
conclude.
round up.
Peter,
Yes.
Pat, please let me just conclude now. One more sentence.
Okay.
Okay. I said there is need to establish a Foreign Service Commission, which should serve as a professional support and regulatory body to serve the benchmark for performance and service delivery. Secondly, the federal government needs to upgrade funding of the foreign ministry. As it stands, foreign affairs gets not up to 1%, but perhaps just that. Thirdly, we have to invest in capacity building. And this means foreign service officials have to be in tune with the changing dynamics of their trade, but also have to be able to address global challenges in a fast evolving world with the requisite tools that they need. A situation where the ministry is not professionalized and where the conduct of foreign policy is not in professional hands will not do us much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. It's a great thing to have it so well articulated for going forward as a country. Now, of course, while we're speaking, Ambassador Bagudu Hershey and Professor George Obiozo also got back online. I think that this is an appropriate place to bring in Ambassador Hershey and take a more specific perspective very quickly. Before I come back to Professor Obiozo on the politics of precarious balancing, I want Ambassador Hershey, who was a minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but who had also served in ECOWAS, because the ECOWAS area, I mean, the thrust of regional integration is a critical part of how Nigeria approached its foreign policy. How well have we fared in the ECOWAS mission, and how does it start Nigeria in the world?
Yeah, Prof, let me apologize for joining you late on this program. And my apology is diplomatic.
It's diplomatic, I know.
I can see the galaxy of the diplomats that are on this program. Let me apologize, quite honestly.
Is he frozen? I think that the internet in Jos may need some intervention. If it's not unfrozen in the next 30 seconds, we may have to go to Professor Obiozo and then Ambassador Hershey can return later. Professor George Obiozo, before you connected back, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi had done a remarkable job of setting the stage and talking about how internal politics affects our diplomacy and our foreign policy. And you are particularly celebrated for the work you have done around how this works. I think it would be a good thing. I see you reaching for your phone. I hope all is well. Can you hear me?
You can speak.
No, it's mute.
Can you unmute yourself, Ambassador?
Ambassador, sorry, I'm back now. I'm back.
Are you back?
I'm sitting on top of the mountains here in Jos.
In Jos, yes. That's why
So,
your reception should be very clear. Okay. Go ahead.
Please, my apologies once more. Now, look, honestly, let me give a little bit of background of how I got involved in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I did not really come through the career, but I'm sure Ambassador Homobi would recall that I was a permanent member of the Federal Civil Service Commission, 1981 to 1991, 10 years. And during that time, you know, we had the civil service, the decree on the civil service reforms, Decree 43, during IBB's time, which transferred all the powers of the commission to the various ministries. And I was very privileged to oversee the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Homobi would testify, would confirm that I was very much involved in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And by fate, I became an ambassador in the ministry. And I am so much aware of the problems in the ministry. And I also dare mention that while I was Minister of State, I was specifically in charge of Africa. You know, there were three ministers then. Chief Ojo Madueke of blessed memory. There was Megari from Yobe, who was in charge of Asia and South Asia and the Pacific. I was specifically in charge of Africa and all the regional bodies in Africa, including ECOWAS, SADC, and the rest of them. And because of that, I got to know a lot of the problems in Africa. Of course, you know that Africa was the cornerstone of our foreign policy. But like Ambassador Homobi, in a very articulate manner, put it, honestly, Nigeria should not be where it is as far as Africa is concerned. It's a pity that we have found ourselves where we are today. Now look at, take for example, this is our problem with Ghana. I don't know where to put the fault. Is it ECOWAS? Is the problem from ECOWAS or from the foreign ministry itself? Look, the ECOWAS Charter states that, there's free movement of citizens of member countries, free movement of goods and services. I think, quite honestly, sanctions should have been done between us and Ghana, dialogue very well, before the embarrassment that we faced. I will come to that later. But let me also say here that Ambassador Homobi has mentioned that the foreign ministry is in the process of setting up, in fact, I think a bill has gone to the National Assembly for a separate civil service commission. The ministry, what do you call it? The two bodies of Association of Foreign Service, whatever it is, have contacted me several times. And I said, in fact, I think it's this coming week that we're going to have a similar kind of setup for discussions for the Foreign Service Commission. I'm a very strong advocate, I repeat, a very strong advocate for a separate Foreign Service Commission. Because what is coming in what is happening in the Federal Civil Service Commission, nothing to write home about. It's unfortunate, unfortunate. I'm in the forefront to fight for a separate Civil Service Commission for the Foreign Service, because of the caliber of people coming into the Foreign Service now. Is a matter of man, no man now, before you get into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is unfortunate. I think I can stop by now. I can stop.
Okay.
Stop here.
At that point, thank you so very much for coming in. I'm going to hold this. I'm going to come back to you later on this matter of West Africa. My particular, if you will, point that I want to raise is Liberia. What we did in Liberia, almost in the way that Ambassador Homoebi focused on what we did in Southern Africa or South Africa. I'd like to raise both again and where we are in spite of those sacrifices. But the point remains that internal affairs impact significantly external affairs. And Professor George Obiozor continues to reflect very stoutly on that. We'd like to invite him at this point to speak to the idea and the concept of the politics of precarious balancing. Professor Akiemi had talked about Balewa and development from there going forward. Ambassador George Obiozor, please come through. Okay, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself and speak now? Professor Obiozor. Okay, all right. While we try to deal with the internet challenges related to that, let me also suggest that we can go off video to increase where our bandwidth is challenged. We can go off video and just use audio.
No, I'm okay now.
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Are you good?
Me? Yes, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Wonderful, I'm so glad. Please, I'm also very sorry for joining late, but it's due to circumstances beyond my control. However, this is wonderful. I must thank Pat, the new generation of Nigerians that still helps us to think of Nigeria with some level of optimism. Nigerian foreign policy is one of the most articulated part of Nigerian governance. And all that has been taking place most of the time depend upon the characters that run the country, not what Nigerian foreign policy is. Nothing in international relations is more constant than foreign policy of nations. Because if you want to study the foreign policy of nations, resort to a trinity of military strategic interests of the nation. That's what we think about national interest levels. Then we talk about the political diplomatic interests of the country and this economic and socio-cultural level of relations. Now, all this is, if we can reduce them also to 5 items, 5 important issues. Number 1 is survival of the country. Second is the expansion of the defense capability, which we call security. The third will be economic or prosperity of the nation. Then the fourth is actually the whole issue of national honor, prestige, territorial integrity or sovereignty. And the fifth is peace. Ironically, many people emphasize peace, peace, peace. If any of your vital national interests is challenged, you throw peace away, or peace comes after victory, not before. Indeed, nobody and no country is for peace without justice. So for Nigeria, the foreign policy was defined on the 7th of October, 1960 by Balewa in the UN. They had to do with the 4 principal issues, which Balewa defined in the UN there. you know, and it was clear what he said. The whole idea of no formal military alliance with any country, the non-alignment of our foreign policy, the whole idea of non-interference in internal affairs, of all these things we are talking about today, nothing is new in Nigerian foreign policy other than the characters that run it and the circumstances. Professor Bolaji Akiyemi must be one of the luckiest foreign ministers, including a few others. If the government we are serving is foreign policy conscious, also domestic policy conscious, then you are in good shape. You gotta define what the national interest is. Because what is foreign policy other than the demands a sovereign state makes on other sovereign nations worldwide, as well as the international system of the moment? So for us in Nigeria today, the problem begins from our domestic politics, what I call the precarious balance. Indeed, on the political strategic level, which has to do with security. If you can't have security at home, how can you expect it to have it abroad? Which one of our borders are we thoroughly securely controlled? So you have a problem of foreign policy where the neighbors become not just anymore a nuisance, but a threat to the sovereignty and the survival of your people. That's the problem you have. That's why people think of the pervasive insecurity. So this is the problem. And then you also talk about international system. The international system today is in a flux. You can't define it. We went from bipolarity, block of East and West bloc. Then we went to the collapse of the Soviet Union, and we thought we were going to polycentrism, many centers of power. Then that one fed on its own. You had a triumvirate when China entered into the system, which has been avoiding for many years. Then the triumvirate couldn't work. Then hell broke loose within the international system. What we have today, in fact, a return of protectionism. Nobody talking about global village now or interdependence. You are talking about America first, Russia first. All these other things. Where do we in Africa, including Nigeria, where do we fit in? First and foremost, our local and the domestic politics, the leaders or the elites have lost control. They have. There was a time that you can say African Union said this, or Africa OAU said this, or said that. What has happened in Africa, I must confess, is incremental decline of effective political leadership. And you cannot have a good diplomatic or foreign policy if you don't have strong forces that are very important. Part of which is the leadership. You can't say today that which African leader can you call upon? Probably a few, but the issue is you can't compare to the past. When you had the people like Nyerere and Nkrumah, even our own Balewa, you know what I mean? So the tragedy, for us to change the history and the pattern of what has happened to Nigeria, we have to come to the issue which I mentioned more than 34 years ago, the precarious balance. You cannot be going to a war of giants with Lilliputian. And that's what is a syndrome in Nigeria. Selection of leadership is almost a national tragedy. So for us, if the truth must be told, we have to think of how to build a harmony among us, and then choose the best for the best that can serve the country and national interest, not sectional interest. Throughout history, those denied the justice have had no interest in peace. So every day you see Nigerian leaders shouting peace, peace. Who wants peace of the grave or unity of masters and slaves? Nobody anywhere in the world. So what we have to do is to re-examine those things that exacerbate our problems, the disintegrative factors and tendencies that are imbued in our politics, domestic policy. Because the linkage between our foreign policy and our domestic policy are so close. The truth is that what you do is to project what's happening to you abroad, at home, abroad, and you protect your own national interest. All nations defend their national interest, and with everything they have, the big, the small. If you cannot, in fact, one reality of international relations is that it is not a Red Cross movement, and it's not a good Samaritan where anybody who is weak and sick, you pick him and help him. This is a place of survivor. It is absolutely determined by victory first and morality later. In fact, for those who can survive, this is how they behave. They identify their national interests and defend them with everything, every resource they have. And that's why those who survive are in front. Others stay behind and complain. And as we have been doing within every international system that arises. So you cannot be asking for concession if you don't have any relative strength. Reciprocity is the name of the game. The problem we have today in Nigeria, which we have been discussing with some level of levity, is a new relationship we have with China. As if China is going to save our country, our continent. They have their own national interest. When they finish negotiating with us, then we will have to pay. They are not here for Red Cross business. Mm-hmm. They are here for their national interest in competition with others who have been here before or those who will come later. What I am saying is simply this part and our distinguished audience. What I'm saying is that it's time for Nigeria to reappraise. In fact, to go in for what Kissinger called the necessity for choice. We honestly have a confused country.
Very sadly.
I stop there.
Yes, thank you so very much. Now, I have a basket full of issues I want to raise. I want to return to trade as part of international relations. It's been raised here. But let me just use this to do a promo. Amongst those on this call who are participating are a couple of former chiefs of defense staff, Generals Alex Ogomudia, Martin Luther Aguai, and a number of them.
Yes.
And I'd like to welcome them, thank them for joining us, and to let you know that our next session, which is 2 weeks from now, we'll look at the military in politics and public life in Nigeria, its impact, its implications, and where we are and where we will be going. So I'd like to thank them all for being on this call, but I'd like to turn into a non-career ambassador, first of all, to talk about the mesh. Ambassador Homaibi talked about the distribution. One of the tragedies of Nigeria of now is, in my view, what I call the triumph of politics. Many people can't pursue regular careers anymore. They have to. Politics is a career. My view is that politics is service. You carry on your career and come in, give service, and go. And you take some of them to play some roles, bring in talent into something like the diplomatic service, and so on and so forth. But there are so many people who are in politics now because they have nothing else to do. And you have to try and plug them into somewhere. And so the foreign service is full of people who add no value in some ways. However, there are people who come in, bringing some value. And I think that Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo has come to that track, and she may have perspectives, especially perspectives in the areas of her passion that took her into representing us and the role that she has played in that regard. So welcome. Spies of your perception of the issues as we have laid out here.
Thank you so much, Professor Tomi, for bringing me on board. I'm exceedingly grateful. I am most excited to be in the company of such distinguished ambassadors. I used to remember how intimidated I was by them. Excellencies, it's a great honor to see all of you on the platform. I cannot start counting all the people here. I am most privileged to be on the same platform with Professor Bolaji and Ambassador Obiozo. These are leading giants of this sector, and I'm very, very pleased to have them. Lieutenant General Agua is here. I worked with him at the African Union. He did a great array. Permanent Secretary, Ambassador Martins. Grateful to be with all of you on this platform. And it was a big honor and privilege for me as a non-carrier to have served under the late Ojo Maduekwe, and at the same time to serve under His Excellency Umaru Yar'Adua that Professor Akinyemi spoke so glowingly about. I cannot join any of you in talking about our country in the past, its rise, because most of you here have more than enough experience to share with the world, nor its fall generally, because I think, again, that's a comparative analysis that needs to happen between the rise and fall. But let me take the argument and the discussion of the dots a bit further. Let me give context to the dots. And I'm so delighted to be coming after Ambassador Obiozo because he's given me all the ingredients to talk about it. He talked about the global trends, a trend from bipolarity to multipolarity, and the return and rise of countries that we saw increasingly of a return to things like America First and the discussions around the world. What does that say to us about our foreign policy? It will be self-serving for me to start by lamenting, like I have heard all of us lament, but I think we mustn't let ourselves fall into the trap of lamentations alone without breaking out of the lamentations and beginning to ask ourselves, where do we go from here? When I became an ambassador, one of the first things I was confronted with was to ask myself, what's the foreign policy? And of course, people were quick to say, Africa is the center place. And fortunately for me, I was in Africa because I went to the African Union. And not long after that also came the whole thing about the citizen centeredness of our foreign policy, because people said, stop playing this big father role anymore, this Father Christmas role anymore, start thinking about your interests. That contestation is still there. And I think Professor Obiozo has given us some food for thought. There are the global trends that we need to think about. These global trends constrict where we go and what we can do. Whether we are a weak country, we are a failing nation, we are unstable, wherever we are, there is still a country called Nigeria, and it has to relate with the rest of the world. It's got to relate in its strengths or weaknesses with the rest of the world. And what happens globally is important. I think that going forward, we're going to see the rise of that contestation between China and the US. And as he said, where do we stand in that contestation? Africa is increasingly leaning towards China because China is coming in with its own resources in a very economic, and oftentimes not enough is being done to assess its exploitative tendencies. That whole area of China, Africa, China, Nigeria, and what that foreign policy approach represents is something I think that we as a country need to give a lot more attention to. But then in view of what's happening globally, as America moves more and more to see China's rise as a problem for it, then we're going to see that bipolarity emerge again. So what do we do in the context of that? And what do we do in the context of our relationship with China? We need to think about that because we are getting more and more indebted to China. And so China is not at least a weak ally when it comes to playing the role in the global economy. The second thing I want to talk about is our identity politics and its international implications. When I was in the African Union, there was a lot of talk about the diaspora being the 6th region of Africa. And we romanticized with it a lot. I can speak about what we thought would come out of the diaspora. And we as Nigeria represent one of the biggest and largest community in the diaspora. And this is not just Nigeria, there's also the whole diaspora that are of African descent, which are outside the continent. The point I'm trying to make now is that with the whole thing around Black Lives Matter Nigeria should have been at the center of driving that discussion about what it is to be an African in the world today. Sadly, we are not doing that. It is an opportunity, and I think we can return to that opportunity. It is an opportunity to redefine the ancestry of the Black people and what it represents to the rest of the world. Let me then speak about where my passion lies a little bit. And I think this is a low-hanging fruit. I come from Cross River State. At the National Assembly, I wept over the loss of Bakassi.
De remil putas, adicta al chino tuerto, negra chota, mal nacida, culiada, mal culiada. Ustedes son culiados. Culo, negra lechera, petera, puta del orto, guanaca, olor a orto, verdulera, olor a pedo, traga.
Well, this is how we do it at the African Union. We have interpreters.
Bueno, listos para la sorpresa.
A todos esos fleites culiados, para ellos este mensaje también. Vos. Persigo a todos lados.
It sounds like an invasion from space.
Yes, sorry about that. It happens from time to time with these things. We're trying to manage it here and to...
Just to round up, Prof, and give you back the place.
Right.
To say that I come from Cross River State, and the loss of Bakassi to me was the greatest pain that anyone can think about. And let me put it on record, although I'm a diplomat, that we don't still think we have lost it entirely. But if we had to lose it, what are we getting in return? Today, most of the challenges we have...
Can you mute? Yes, go.
Okay, most of the challenges, thank you. Most of the challenges we have are coming from the neighboring countries. And Professor Obioso talked about the place of peace and the fact that you are as strong, your internal, your foreign policy or relations is as strong as the way you relate with your neighbors. What is it about Cameroon? Please, Excellencies, what is it about Cameroon? Excellencies, what is it about Cameroon? Everybody I speak to, we have over 6,000 refugees, 60,000 refugees living in Cross River State from the Amazonian conflict in the southwest of Cameroon. Question I ask myself, why has Nigeria not done what it did in South Africa? Why has Nigeria not taken over that conflict and made it a conflict it can handle and manage? What is it about Cameroons that we have refused to get involved? Over 60,000 refugees are languishing in Cross River State. The boundaries between Nigeria and the Cameroons on that flank. I say this because we talk a lot about the Northeast, and we forget that we have a very serious crisis on the other flank of the country. Today, I have heard the Cameroonian refugees are sending me messages telling me that, look, there is a move to return us back to our country and it is not safe for us to go back. What is our country doing about this? We have lost Bakassi. What is the price that we are paying for resolving the conflict in Southwest Cameroon? Every international I have spoken to says, what is Nigeria saying about the Amazonian conflict? Nigeria must speak up. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. The need for Nigeria to speak up on many things all over the canvas. Obviously, we have not organized ourselves to be able to speak up on anything the way things are, sadly, in our country today. This is why it's important to deal with the internal issues. But as I get ready to go to Ambassador Ayo, who look at me, I just want to point to a few of the pains that Nigerians are dealing with. When we talk about, I know that you served in Africa in addition to Australia and all of that. We look at Africa. As a 19-year-old, my claim to fame was that I challenged the foreign minister at the time, Colonel, as he was, Joseph Namvengarba, about our Southern Africa policy. And he came to University of Nigeria to engage us, to debate us, even in the middle of a huge crisis. I mean, within days of the assassination of General Murtala Mohammed in 1976, but we started that debate in 75. And we saw citizens' input. In the case of Liberia, I was pained to death that after Nigeria, the Liberian ambassador to Nigeria was my classmate in the US. And when he returned to Liberia and things were deteriorating, I mean, we communicated, but when he became ambassador, he was here in Lagos. He used to come to my house just around the corner from where I'm sitting right now. And he would say that he doesn't understand Nigeria, how much we have done for them. Sirenius 4 was his name. How much Nigerian lives have been poured out in Liberia, how much money we had pumped into Liberia, but that we were making almost exactly the same mistakes that Liberia made to get where it was then. And we don't seem to have learned anything from it. But the day that I really was most pained was after all that sacrifice, the day that an interim president was being installed in Liberia. We watched the Americans put that man in the American ambassador's car and go to his swearing in. What is wrong? Go ahead. Ambassador, look at me.
Yes,
what
sir.
is wrong? Why do we keep getting that wrong?
Well, thank you very much. I sincerely hope you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. You know, my dear brother Pat, Prof. It's a pleasure to be here, to also be with distinguished personalities. Our former foreign minister, Professor Akinyemi. We have Ambassador Bagudu Hirsi. Also have the former PAMSEC himself, is here. Ambassador Uhomoibi. And I'm also very much delighted to see the person I call me comrade ambassador. That is Ambassador Nkoyo, who we work together on the gender and development front as well. And also all our senior colleagues, ambassadors who are here. I can see Ambassador Lumako, I can see every other person. And then my colleagues who are in here, Michael Motosho, Ambassador Latidoye, and then some of our senior junior colleagues too as well. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for. I will try as much as possible to be brief, and I will come from the perspective of somebody as a career diplomat on the ground, who Professor Akinyemi has also extolled and said thank you to all of us who spend our entire life in the foreign service. Thank you very much for recognizing this. Nigerian diplomats are the one out there who face the blazing end of the AK-47 when it comes to all these issues. I think this is one issue, and I want to say thank you, Ambassador Akinfayomi, all our colleagues who, one way or the other, implement, because no matter how much we articulate, the question and issues of implementation is key, both by the frontline foreign policy establishment, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Nigerian diplomats. But in terms of the topic itself, of course, I would not want to go back to what has been said. Professor Akinyemi has articulated it. Professor Biozo also has articulated in terms of the domestic crisis in which we face. I sum it up when I speak with some of my colleagues that we had the golden years, the foreign policy period, the period of our peacekeeping operations, the role we played in the struggle against apartheid, because I served in 3 of the UN headquarters. I served in the PAM mission, New York, twice, with Legion and Garba. I served in the PAM mission, Nairobi, as acting PAM rep and UNEP, dealing with UNEP and environment issues. I also served in Vienna as acting PAM rep IEA, and I see Nigeria at the forefront in those places. And also work in Tel Aviv in Israel before the appointment as ambassador and sent on to Australia, covering New Zealand, Fiji, Papua New Guinea. Either you like it or not, as a country, as Nigeria, a lot of burden comes on you. And I'm saying it as a diplomat in terms of it. And that's why I'm saying that we've had our golden years as far as this is concerned. And I remember that when I was in Vienna, the Vienna Foreign Ministry was telling us and telling me that it was the Nigerian contingent that went to Congo just a few hours after Nigerian independence, who rescued the Austrian forces who were captured by the people in Congo. I repeat that, Nigerian forces, Nigerian peacekeeping operations led by Rayvolution that time, who helped to rescue the Austrian forces from the ground. I mean, this is a reflection of the point. And like I said, as somebody who served in all those places in the mission, I see that that is where we were as far as our foreign policy itself is concerned. You can't just hide it. But now I say that the Nigerian foreign policy, of course, has run into CAT. What in aviation cycle they call CAT, spelled as Charlie Alpha Tango, that is CAT. CAT in aviation cycle means clear air turbulence. I repeat that, clear air turbulence. Our foreign policy is running into clear air turbulence. And when pilots run into clear air turbulence, they disengage the autopilot to fly their equipment, to fly the flight. And that's why I'm saying the issue which has been raised by Professor Akinyemi and all other speakers, saying that the question of our domestic policies and others comes in this particular place. We have to come back and resolve the crisis of our federalism. It is key, it is very important, absolutely. I'll give good examples because before I round up, they say I have just about 5 minutes. When I was High Commissioner in Australia, it coincided with the period of the Chibok girls. And then the Australian media and others were running after us at that particular period. I, as High Commissioner, had to go. I was saying, what am I going to tell them? Because eventually I went to the Australia Broadcasting Corporation studios. And the first question of, Ambassador, what is wrong with your country? What were all of you looking at when this number of girls? Of course, we can only just put a good face with it. It was a reflection of the crisis of our country, the question of security and others. I have the video. See, one of these days, maybe it's going to be part of my memoirs. That is an issue. And here was a country like ours who has also served in Somalia through peacekeeping operation and right up there. So one of the things I say, we are in clear turbulence as far as our foreign policy is concerned, and we need to come back home to resolve our domestic crisis, domestic problems, which of course, Professor Akinyemi, Pamsef, Homoibi, and all of us have said. So what we are saying is that, yes, we're in this problem as far as our foreign policy is concerned. What are the reasons? The reasons are quite clear. One, poor visibility, lack of focus, the question of national interest definition, which people have been talking about, and of course, absence from area and key issues like the Black Lives Matters, which has also been raised here. So that's one aspect of it. But the question also, of course, is the question of issue of love or respect for our people, from Nigeria, is also tied up to that perspective in terms of people. Let me tell you, I say I like to give practical example. When I served in Nairobi in Kenya, the KQ-433 and KQ-432 was linchpin. That's the Kenyan Airways when they fly in those places. There were a lot of problems in those places for obvious reasons. For time, I will not be able to say. Because when the KQ-432 leaves and the KQ-310 from Dubai comes in, Nigerians are there. And Nigerians are not being allowed to come into Kenya. They keep you sitting at the hotel. They keep you sitting at the airport at that particular place. And so from the mission, we have to go and try and resolve those issues. Ironically, each time we go there, Nigeria was the only country that had a mission in Nairobi. The other West African people say, please don't leave us alone. Also fight for us. So you end up doing that. When the Security Council came to Nairobi to try and sort out, one of the first time they came to Nairobi in terms of the comprehensive peace agreement. After that, Nigeria was not in the Security Council. But it was Nigeria they called on to come out, plant the tree, commemorative tree. And I said, Nigeria, I was acting like commissioner. I said, who do you want to come to this place? And there have been instances even in this fight for Security Council seat when people are saying, look, Nigeria, you must be the one to. So these are issues which, like I said, it will devour on us. It will continue to devour us as Nigeria. And in terms of repackaging our foreign policy, I think we need to look at that. Now, the question is that I think we need a second coup in terms of the theoretical perspective, the new vision, the new world. I serve currently as Director General of NASIMA, Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines, and Agriculture. And despite the crisis, people still want to come into this economy. The mining sector is opening and all of us like that. And I said, what are you looking for? They said, look, you like it or not, your country remains a place where we can make money and we will come in. Even in war situation, people will come in. That is one issue. But before I leave, let me quickly now look at the whole question of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. as the front line, because no matter what we articulate in terms of implementation, that is key. And that is why I want to salute my colleagues, Nigerian ambassadors, career foreign service officer, and even some of the non-career who have been on the forefront in terms of pushing our foreign policy. When you are out there as a Nigerian diplomat, implicitly you expect your headquarters to be behind you, to give you direction, to give you, unfortunately, several times because of the crisis, in the foreign ministry. And I let me mention it specifically. The growing and deepening irrelevance and marginalization of MFA in policy making and implementation. That is one key point. Let us please look at that. Multiple foreign policy center. And then, of course, the whole question of, the Diaspora Commission has been spoken about, in terms of what exactly is happening, and that is one area. But the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will remain both the intellectual as well as the implementing arm. And so it is necessary to strengthen the ministry. And that's why, of course, I think the question of over-politicization of the place is there. Ambassador Baguru Hussein mentioned it. I don't want to spend too much time on that. And that is where the question and issues of a foreign policy, foreign service commission comes in. We must work to have this. Yeah. It is very, very important. And we must get it right. Now, the question of appointment of a professional as career ambassador, Ambassador Uhomobi will say he was one of those who also, in terms of, that is key. Let us make all the effort as much as possible to ensure that career diplomat, and that means are the one that eventually come as PS. And that means that they must be trained properly. They must be trained properly. I serve as Director of Public Communication and spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for 3 years when I came back from Nairobi. And I said that I had to write down a vision in terms of foreign policy implementation, the era of Twitter diplomacy, e-diplomacy, diplomacy 140 character in terms of Twitter. And so it is important to train our diplomats. It is very, very important. Unfortunately, that's not the situation now. And that's why we have to. Then the question and issues of morale. I think Ambassador Uhomobi has said, I think maybe about 50%, 50-50. I don't know now, a new appointment has been made. It does not give good, it does not encourage career foreign service. We need to do that. Perhaps we should put it into the constitution that we will not have more than 10 non-career ambassadors. FCO, India, and then we will select the mission where you send those 10 people. If it is in the constitution, there's a limit to which what can be done in terms of playing with that.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
So I think these are key issues. But let me now end with this, and that is from our own experience. Like I said, as ambassador, practical experiences. While I was in Australia, I would identify the mining sector as one of the areas which is key and very important, because the story of Australia is the story of its mining sector, the story of mining, the story of Australia. I work closely to bring in, with our colleagues, but I had to now rely on the Ministry of Mines and Steel Development because my ministry said did not rise up to it. So that is why I think the question and issue is very important as far as strengthening the Ministry of Foreign Affairs itself. I think those are the key issues. In closing, like I said, as DG Nasima, I now see it again in terms of the economic dimension, the issue of economic diplomacy, and how our missions are somehow disconnected from the economic issues and things that is going on. So it is necessary for having a strategic a partnership in this particular area. Once again, I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity. There's very little you can say in all of this.
Very much. The issue of the economic aspect, General Ike Nwachukwu as foreign minister emphasized the issue of economic diplomacy.
I was part of economic diplomacy too as well. And I want to recognize people like
get back to that in some ways, because the state of the world today requires that. You talked about, or it was said earlier, about where the US is in terms of America first and all of that. Let's bear in mind that historically, the way the world has traveled is that we have international trade grow, and international trade leads to greater prosperity for all. Then you get people who come and want to defend their gains within that international trade. And this leads to bigger than neighbor policies, what the US is doing currently. Invariably, historically, these bigger than neighbor policies push the world to an economic depression. And invariably, the economic depression is followed by a major war. And these cycles have gone on through human history. So that we need to engage these issues and talk about trade a lot more aggressively and what it means for the kind of world order that we want. But before we go to those, there are pressing issues. Ambassador Toyo has raised the question of Cameroon and a couple of such other issues. Let me return to Professor Bolaji Akinyemi to please try and orient us on some of these issues.
Thank you very much, Pat. Ambassador Koyo, if you just go back to period of 1957 to probably 1960, how the differential in how we dealt with Northern Cameroons and Southern Cameroons. The federal government, through all its resources, in collaboration with the northern region at that time, to make sure that Northern Cameroon was incorporated into Nigeria. We didn't show the same enthusiasm in the referendum in Southern Cameroon. And so we lost Southern Cameroon to the Republic of Cameroon. A lot of people now don't remember that Southern Cameroon used to be part of Nigeria. We lost it in that referendum, not due to the machination of the British or the French or the United Nations, but because, again, we did not, or the forces in control at the center did not want to disturb the census balance or the power balance in the country. They were happy to see.
I'm glad you make that point. Very glad, yes.
Then you now asked, or you didn't ask, you said, you don't think we've lost Bakassi, that maybe there's still something we can do. I plead with you, please, don't encourage false hopes. We have lost Bakassi because of what I referred to as the factor of ego tripping in foreign policy. Somebody wanted to be seen as a peacemaker and perhaps get the Nobel Peace Prize. And therefore, without even waiting for the World Court judgment, already agreed with Kofi Annan that we will accept whatever judgment was given by the World Court. Please don't let us go into a war with Cameroon, a war in which Cameroon will be backed by the French. And before you know it, we will now have this cycle of wars that characterizes the relationship between Pakistan and India. That is what will happen if we try by force, because that's the only way we can do it, to reverse the exclusion of Bakassi from Nigeria. That's just what I like to say.
Thank you very much. I'd like to, at this point, I will come back to Ambassador Hershey on the economic diplomacy made, but just to remind us that part of the reason for this series is for the young people. And because of that, I have some young co-hosts who we get to ask some questions. Some of them are located in the US, some are located here in Nigeria, and we'll get to them in a quick second. But let me put this economic diplomacy thing and ask Dr. Ambassador Hershey and Professor Obiozo to speak to it briefly. Ambassador Hershey from the ECOWAS perspective, and generally from Professor Obiozo. Clearly, a lot of international trade considerations drive foreign policy. What is our national strategy in terms of trade, and how is that affected by our international relations? In fact, I give an example. When the US started this question of China, they had a big workshop at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. And they commissioned a lot of studies, or a number of studies, on China's growing economic influence in Africa. Interestingly, I was the one who did this part of the world. Chatham House did Angola. A Kenyan gentleman at UNDP did Kenya and all of that. And we all gathered in Washington at the Center for Strategic and International Studies to look at China's growing influence in Africa. Again, Ambassador Ayo Lukomi, who is here, I think you helped the mission in Shanghai arrange for me to go to the Shanghai Institute of Strategic Studies when the Chinese tried to respond to the American one. What is our national strategy in terms of trade and commerce, and how is our foreign policy driving that today? So Ambassador Hershey, will start from you, and Professor Obiozo will finish, then I'll take a couple of questions and then get my young co-hosts to ask some questions.
Thank you very much. Can I speak?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Prof, thank you very much for this opportunity once more. Talking about trade, economics, and all this. Let me make it very clear without any fear of contradiction to this forum that we cannot be talking of trade and when we have not even put our own house in order. In terms of economics. Can you imagine that in those days, we were exporting, now we are importing more than exporting? This is unbelievable. People have talked so much about it in the media that we must address this. Otherwise, we shouldn't be talking of improving our economics when we have not put our house in order. Now, let me give you an example. I have just finished serving as a director on the board of NLNG. And you know that the basic foundation of our economy is in the oil and gas industry. Oil, of course, contributes a lot to our GDP. Each time I sit on the board with my colleagues from Shell, from Total, from ENI, which is the umbrella body for NAOC, you know that our refineries, for instance, our refineries are not producing up to 30% capacity utilization. And all because of the Nigerian factor. I keep asking these white guys on the board that we sit on the board with them. I said, look, the issue of LNG, which is gas refining, and petroleum are basically the same engineering. One is dealing with refining of crude oil, and that's the refineries. Then we are dealing with refining of gas, natural gas. The engineering technology is virtually the same. I've asked these guys, why don't you take over our refineries? They said, no. The Nigerian factor is too much in the refineries. And we have ended up spending more money importing refined oil. The government has to address that. quite seriously. Only very few people are benefiting from this.
Yeah, Ambassador Heshi.
So that's number one. As far as foreign policy is concerned, you know, while we were in office, government at that time introduced the policy of Technical Aid Code, TAC. And that was one area where we influenced not only within Africa, but all over the world. We sent our boys who were well-trained, and they created a lot of impact where they were posted to.
But whatever happened to that scheme? Where is that scheme today?
Only God knows what is happening. Only God knows what is happening to TAC today. We made a very great impact.
Yes.
With TAC.
Especially in the Caribbean, in such places.
In the Caribbean, and so forth and so forth.
Yeah.
The DG was reporting to me. And we made a lot of impact there. Only God knows what has become of TAC today. So these are areas that we have to look into.
Yeah, this can go on and on, but our time is running out. I appreciate your point there. It's very valuable. But I like Professor Obiazoto, just a quick 1 minute, 2 minutes on this whole business of economic diplomacy and where we stand today. Unmute yourself. Help.
Good, do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great man, great man, great man. Now, let me be frank with you. I want to make one comment about career and non-career diplomat.
Right.
Part of your foreign policy is also to sell the nation, its entirety. In major countries of the world, sometimes you send the most successful people who are exemplary success of your country.
Businessmen of outstanding stature.
That is how it is done.
But not jobless politicians.
No, hold on, my friend. The truth is this: in decent countries where these things are done well, somebody like Wole Soyinka would have been a Nigerian ambassador in the UN.
Yes.
And if he walks around, the people who come around and say the Nigerian ambassador is here. Isn't that true?
Absolutely.
Let me tell you the truth, how I did my own. My own magic was different. I wore Nigerian Igbo dress, royally dressed in Israel.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I came among the most recognized ambassadors there. In the United States of America, the same thing. They realized that if America is #1 in the world, Nigeria is #1 in Africa, and it was clear my presence was there, and it's still there. So it depends upon what you, sometimes personality, in fact, the issue of a diplomat is that somebody must represent his country nearly in its entirety. In other words, if you cannot get attention, you will never get the audience with your host country. You must make every make every effort to get attention and defend and promote the national interests of your country in your host country. Yeah. Let me go from there, and then according to Ambassador Okoye, I don't want us to keep on lamenting. I want to tell you what must and needs to be done now.
Yep.
I really believe there should be a comprehensive review of Nigerian foreign policy now, and the president should appoint a committee of experts to handle it. Nigeria must redefine its priority. As a matter of fact, national interests of any country can be articulated and pursued. You have heard about George Bush, the Bush doctrine. Even now, you have heard about Monroe doctrine.
Yes.
In Nigeria, which is time we have a doctrine. We're talking about Liberia. Thank God somebody mentioned Liberia. In Liberia, Nigeria played a star role.
Yes.
Played a star role. I want to tell you something that will only appear in some people's biography. One Nigerian journalist called Chid Amuta wrote one interesting small article in the Guardian. I was special assistant to the President Babangida then. After reading that article, I was so fascinated by this Nigerian who wrote a wonderful article on Liberia and what Nigeria could do. The president agreed with me, invited him to come and see what the government is doing on Liberia. It is the origin of the book called Prince of the Niger, which he did with Yemi Ogunbi. Ask him. The issue here is we have lamented enough. We should have think of what must be done. Because if we really wait for leaders in Nigeria as well as in Africa, believe me honestly, there's a complete dichotomy between those who have ideas and those who have the power. So until you get two of them, the two sides, to have some level of convergence and work together, you can't do anything very positive. The second thing I think must be done is, in fact, to fund, Martin Omohadi said it, fund the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the level of expenditure in foreign countries. Nigeria is not a banana republic, and therefore you cannot send people abroad and then expect them to do magic with the exhibition of poverty and the deprivation. Therefore, also, thirdly, adopt policies that ensure and that Nigeria continues to provide necessary leadership in Africa, particularly from West Africa, because really what makes a great leader is those you carry with you. Nigeria is not capable of being a lone ranger. And the issue here is a good number of things we are doing is isolating us from Africa. You yourself said it. If you isolate yourself, use a family event. If you isolate yourself from your junior brothers, after a while, they dislike you.
Yeah.
That's what happened at Ghana. Our relationship with Ghana is so special for those of us who are old enough for it to lead to the kind of occupation or even as we have. So I want to tell you this finally, before. The perception of Nigeria today is so negative. We must begin to change that perception of Nigeria from negative to positive. And it must begin from the leadership. That is my own submission.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. I think at this point, we'll go to questions, very quick ones. We have Professor Akinyeye and Chris Uwaje. We'll take one minute questions from them before we go to Claire Lemachi, my co-hosts. Yes, Professor Akinyeye. Unmute yourself, please.
Mute.
Right.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me now.
I can hear you now, yes.
Yeah, let me commend you for the good job you are doing and inform you that the federal government has put in place a mechanism for a comprehensive review of governance in Nigeria in general, and then foreign policy and international relations in particular. I'm serving in a technical working group on the foreign policy and international relations. I hope your forum will send in inputs from this exercise to that body for necessary action. Then on the issue of the comprehensive review of foreign policy in Nigeria, I think the issue we have here is that of giving strength to our belief in our interests, our national interests, as propelling our foreign policy. The issue of xenophobia in South Africa and the invasion of our embassy or High Commission in Ghana has to do with this issue of protection of our national interests, particularly the segment that deals with citizen diplomacy, that Nigerians everywhere if they are maltreated, can count on the interest, can count on the protection of their government for redress and the protection of their rights. As for Ghana, if we had adequate claim to the territory or to the portion of land on which the High Commission was built, I think what Ghana has done is an offense to international law. Going by the principle of extraterritoriality, that premises is an extension of Nigerian territory. To go there and pull down is similar to an invasion of Nigeria. The country should explore its rights under international law to make sure that appropriate redress is sought and obtained.
Thank you so much.
That we should make sure that we have adequate and appropriate title to the land before we can make any decision. So on that, I want to argue that the proceedings from this exercise should be sent to the body that government has set in motion to look into a comprehensive review of our foreign policy and the issue of governance in general. Thank you.
We'll do just that. Thank you very much. Well, let me invite Chris Uwaje to very quickly, in 1 minute maximum.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much for all the speakers and that are on the table here. I think my submission is really a question, and that's that the convergence of foreign policy and domestic policy today is driven by technology. If we look at what we've been saying, and it's being recorded online on YouTube, you can really analyze the context of the data flow and information that is submitted. Today, the world is being driven by about 20 petabytes of data that is flowing on all systems per day. So how do you reconcile the lack of data availability and mastery of technology and science and technology at home to create a dynamic foreign policy? Indeed, technology has become the center, and I'll say, the precarious balance between foreign policy, international conquest, and domestic survivability. We've been mentioning foreign policy thousands of times here. I didn't even hear about education. We need to retool the entire workforce and the manpower of our society to be ready for the conquest of foreign policy to balance domestic policy and survivability. The time is now. All those quantum of data, if we can control them and use it to retool the minds and society of our younger people who should be patriotic. We're talking about patriotism, self-survivability. All these are between the realms of data that could be balanced and harnessed digitally. We have almost about 81 million people taking cell phone on their hands. What are we doing to be able to command, those powers of the youth?
I agree with you very much. It's so important. Information is the currency of now. In talking about that, incidentally, when the CSIS in Washington invited me to do that study on China's growing influence in this part of the world, I tried to get information out of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Interestingly, at that time, my roommate, the now late Dr. Chike Anibo, Ambassador Anibo, was, I guess, what the French call chef de cabinet in the office of the foreign minister, I think Ojo Maduekwe at the time. The director in charge of Asia was also somebody I knew, but I hardly could get any data out of foreign affairs. They didn't even have the speech that General Obasanjo made at the China-Africa summit the year before. So we need an information system, a policy that can enable the Ministry of External Affairs or Foreign Affairs build a knowledge management system. These are the fundamentals of today's world. People talk about intelligence, and they think of cloak and dagger. It's just a matter of processing information that enables you make decisions. On that note, I'm going to call in Claire to ask her question, and I hope Lemachi is getting ready. Yes, Claire.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being being here. I think two things. Firstly, the first might be more of a statement, but I really hope it rings in the back of our minds going forward. Professor Moibi talked about how our treatment currently in South Africa is not a reflection of our history with them. I think really, how can we expect them to remember when we ourselves don't remember? I know for a fact, if I asked anyone in my generation if Nigeria had a hand to play, let alone to the extent we did in South Africa's apartheid, less than 3 out of 10 would probably maybe say yes with uncertainty. So history, and thank you again, Dad, for this series, is so important to understanding our relationships with others. But secondly, my question, a bit more to Professor Akinyemi and maybe Ambassador Biazo, I always like to look at pivot points, and hopefully as diplomatically as you can, do you think you can point to a time where you think really signifies the beginning of the end, or who or what signifies the beginning of fall of our foreign affairs in Nigeria? That might be a tough one, but I do hope you can be able to address that.
Thank you, Claire. By the way, Claire comes to us from the US. Full disclosure, Claire is my daughter at Wharton. Okay. Lemachi, yes.
Yes.
Let's take your question.
Good afternoon, everybody.
My second co-host.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, the speakers. This is one of the few topics, or one of the only topics my generation don't really have enough information about, especially putting Nigeria into in relation to Nigeria. When we think of foreign policy, the first thing we think of is America, the UK. We think of their relationships with other countries. So I just wanted to ask this for Professor Akinyemi. When you were a minister, was there something people knew Nigeria for in relation to foreign policy? Was it always like this, where foreign policy and Nigeria presently, there's no correlation, there's no relation, it's almost like it's non-existent? So I just wanted to ask, when you were minister, was there something that the average young person or the average Nigeria could pinpoint and say, this is what Nigeria was known for?
Okay.
In relation to foreign policy? Yeah.
Right. Lemachi, I was just going to say, I said in one of my introductions, when I was a 19-year-old student leader, the most important issue in Nigeria was foreign policy. It trumped any other policy area. As undergraduates, we sacrificed even a meal to contribute to the liberation movement. And when I wanted pressure on Nigerian foreign policy to go in a direction, I actually came to Lagos, which was the capital of Nigeria, and went to the office of the foreign minister, who was then Colonel Joseph Nanven Garba, to raise the issue. We cut a long story short about what happened, but he quickly summoned his special assistant, Ambassador Brownson Dede, and accepted my challenge to come to Nsukka and to debate us. And he did. That was in 75, but the date we chose, I think, was something like February 15th or 16th, 1976. On the 13th, there was a coup attempt. The head of state was killed. But Colonel Garba shocked us in the middle of a national crisis by arriving to debate that issue with us in 1976. That's how important foreign policy was in Nigeria. Okay, I'll invite Ambassador Shola Enikolaye. Okay, all right.
Never mind.
Okay. That makes more sense. Nobody owns it all.
Thank you, Prof, for this opportunity to make one or two remarks. I want to salute my mentors and seniors who have spoken before me on this matter. I retired as permanent secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs just 3 years ago, and currently on contract appointment with the National Defense College. So I'll just speak to, or rather identify 4 or 5 things that we need to do going forward. As Ambassador Nkoyo said, we shouldn't just lament and lament. First of all, we need to, and that brings the point you just made, we need to recognize the salience and significance of foreign policy in Nigerian national development. It appears to me as if foreign policy is still conceived in rather esoteric terms, far removed from the Nigerian people And therefore, we need to do more for Nigerians, including the younger ones that I just spoke, to better understand, appreciate, and see the benefit of foreign policy into their lives. Unfortunately, that is not happening. Look at the manifestos of the political parties and the political debate. Hardly was foreign policy ever mentioned. Second point, we need to lead with the quality of ideas that we espouse, whether on national, Africa, or global issues, so that we lead by ideas. People can follow us and resonate with us as we go forward. And that means, third point, we need to build consensus around issues of national interest, consensus domestically, consensus in the sub-region, consensus globally, through consultations. I can tell you that Nigerian foreign policy, we hardly consult other countries. Hardly do we do so. We go to events almost self-assured that whatever position we take, other countries will follow. We need to consult more. And then the fourth point I want to make is relations with the big five. I'm glad the issue of restructuring was mentioned. We tend to take recognition of states. We've not paid attention to the fact that if there were a problem of secession in our country today, and some big guy decides to recognize those secessionist tendencies, then we have a problem in our hands. So our foreign policy must gear towards ensuring the support and the buy-in of the big powers in particular, I mean, including our neighbors, of course, to support Nigeria's territorial integrity, Nigerian unity as it is. And then one other point, sir, there's the element of Nigeria soft power, which in my view, we have not quite celebrated or recognized. There are 4 elements of this. Nigeria's music and culture, including Nollywood, Nigeria culinary and sartorial traditions, and idea art, the Pentecostal churches, with which we can build, we can affect the minds and hearts of people towards Nigeria. And of course, the organized private sector. Look at the way the Dangote is spreading all over Africa, the Tony Elumelu. We need to do more. Nigerian financial institutions like the GTB and Zenab. But these guys are there on their own. There's hardly any correlation with Nigerian foreign policy. And finally, greater synergy between foreign and defense policy. You need a foreign policy that is backed by an equally robust defense policy, such that Nigerian national interest can be further promoted. And then strategy for prosecution of Nigeria's economic diplomacy. I'm afraid we don't have a very clear-cut strategy on how we can better prosecute this very important agenda, because the golden era was under decolonization. Now, emphasis should be on economic issues, but what is the strategy, either on the part of the Minister of Foreign Affairs or the part of economic ministries, to ensure that we are able to deliver on this very important aspect of our foreign policy.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate this, and particularly at the point of Nigeria's soft power. I was going to raise it, it just didn't then come up, but we need really to play so big on that. I appreciate those comments. There's so many more people who now want to ask questions, but we don't have the time. We really need to close, but I'll just, if they will keep to 30 seconds each, we'll just take all of them before we then close. John Omagi, Emmanuel Etim, and Kukuola Okbeyemi. Please, 30 seconds each, and then we'll round up. Yes, yes, Professor Kiemi.
Yes, look, I need to make a correction before you close. Technical aid scheme is still surviving. I was surprised to hear the Minister of State saying he doesn't know what had happened to it. It is still there in the ministry. It was started by IBB, not under a PDP government, and it is still there. And those people are still spread all around the world. So they're still there. Secondly, the question the gentleman asked, I think the high point of our thing was the decolonization of Africa. But following that, you have had what has been referred to. But I believe that the high point of my own term there was this technical aid cost scheme, number one. Number two,
concert
the
of medium
powers, which was an attempt to consolidate on the medium status of Nigeria. That the two corrections I'd like to make.
No, fantastic. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. So can we take 30 seconds from each of these gentlemen or ladies I mentioned? John Omagi, Emmanuel Etim.
Yes. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. So honored to be given this opportunity to ask a question. I actually was on the road when someone was mentioning education. My question or concern is, why do we as Nigerians looking now to study abroad have to write IELTS exam, being an English-speaking country? The annoying part is the cost is 75,000 and it only lasts for 2 years. So why do I have to sit beside an Indian or a Cameroonian or a country that does not even speak English in the first place, just to prove that I can communicate in English language when I get out there? That's my question. What are we doing about this to address this? Thank you.
Okay, let's take the next one. Okpeyemi. Yeah, Okpogbola Okpeyemi, please.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Prof. Really appreciate it. Such a great privilege to be on this forum. I haven't listened to our daddies in the house because I'm just a child here. A quick one. What I just want to say is that how well is the education sector working towards integrating history into the curriculum? Because when we are leaving it too late for us to be graduate before we become familiar with our own history, I think it's more or less like we are shooting ourselves in the leg. But when we have it right from primary level, our younger generation getting familiar with history, I think the aspect of foreign policy and how to go about implementing, because after all has been said and done, how do we get people who already understand this to shift into action, prompt action? So I'm just asking, how well is this working in hand in hand with education? Because personally, as an education officer, I'm thinking of how well we can integrate this in. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I think the last one's from Emmanuel Etim. Is he still there? And I would then invite Professor Bolaji Akiemi to give us closing thought, perhaps incorporating a response, if any, to the questions raised.
Well, thank you very much, Pat, for this stimulating and wonderful session. I will speak later to Ambassador Onikan Onaye.
Olaye?
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Onikan.
Thank you.
No individual.
Oh, yeah.
World, I think.
I understand. So I would love, I mean, you made a wonderful presentation. I must congratulate you on that. But I would have loved, I mean, you were permanent secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I know your contribution at various platforms at NIIA during that period. I would love to know what efforts, or anyway, don't let me put it that way. Let me just say you've given us food for digestion, but I don't like politicians who become statesmen after they are no longer in a position to implement the wonderful ideas they then bring up after they have left office, because it is very frustrating. When you're in office, you have the power, you have the status to push for some of these things. And finally, George and I served in NIA. That institute never turned up in any of our discussions. I hope that is just an omission on our part, and it's not an indication that it has been consigned to obscurity. And the question a lady asked, and she directed the question at both George and I, but then I can't remember. Sign of old age, what the question was.
No, I think
finally,
Claire was asking, there was supposed to be a question about history and teaching history, and then Claire was, if you can remember where we began to go south in our foreign policy, where was the break? When did this...
That's true. I think the rain started falling on our head during the post-June 12th crisis. Because that was the time we were even suspended, if my recollection is right, from the Commonwealth.
Yes.
You know, we were suspended. We became a pariah, all because of that crisis. And I believe that's when the rain really started falling head. When in 1999, you know, Chief Obasanjo became head of state, we had an opportunity to make a big umbrella for Nigeria to be under, to go into the world, back into the world community. He was more interested in he being under that umbrella while we were left out. When I say we, I mean Nigeria. Because
okay,
that's what I meant by going on an ego. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you so much for not just an excellent expose, but great diplomacy, which nearly failed in the last minute in terms of the pursuit of a Nobel Peace Prize and all of that. But there's nothing to add. You know, in those days, Volkswagen used to build a car, the Santana, that had as its payoff line, there's nothing more to add. I'd like to say that we are extremely grateful to Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, to Ambassador Begudu Heshi, to Professor George Ubioza, to Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, Ambassador Udukomia, Ambassador Martins Homoebi, and all of the people who have contributed to this valuable conversation. I hope that it helps us begin to retool and rebuild a very important part of who we are. Thank you so very much. Have a very pleasant rest of the day. Hey,
Prof.
The great George.
Please, because we're making history here, and we are making history, which is extraordinarily important.
Okay.
We must keep certain things right.
All right, go ahead.
Professor Bolaji Akinyemi was right. We cannot cry over spilled milk about Bakassi. But what is important to know, I was the last person to speak about Bakassi before he went to the Hague.
Right.
And then we got caught up with that precondition that once the ruling is done, everybody must accept the rule of the Hague. Honestly, in that lecture, which I gave at Abiokute, not Abiokute, it was in Ogun State, Chris Kolade, the businessman.
Chris Ogubanjo.
Ogubanjo, yes, please. That lecture, I advised that we shouldn't go to ICJ because of that precondition. However, eventually we went to ICJ. But the most important thing is that with ICJ, once the court is rules, there's nothing else you can do. The ruling was done And then only I was also there when the Green Tree Agreement was signed, where Cameroon was given complete surrender, unquote, of Bakassi. However, what is important here is that to some extent, I followed the thing from some part of his beginning to the end. Honestly, probably President Obasanjo has little to do or could prevent nothing other than precipitate a new crisis. Bakassi was actually lost by Nigerians. The Bakassi was lost by the agreement or declaration by Gowan. That declaration between him and
the civil war effect.
Definitely between him and Ahijo.
Ahijo, yes.
Definitely. The Marwa Declaration.
Yeah.
The Marwa Declaration completely, really made it impossible for Nigeria to defend because all the documents that were used to defeat us in The Hague were produced by as evidence through Nigerian negotiations with Cameroon. In fact, Akinjide, the late Akinjide, who was one of the representatives of Nigeria in the court, said that all the instruments that were used to defeat us came from us. A very important issue to make. A second thing is this issue of definitely. I have just written about this matter now. This Bakassi, a little of it, back to the issue of who lost Bakassi. In fact, Bakassi was lost through Nigerian political recklessness, through being over what I would say, trying to overplay the concessions made for closing the border between Nigeria and Cameroon. There's no room here for me to defend anybody, but what is important is that the Marwa Declaration tied our hands, the Nigerian hands.
Yes.
And the other things that also happened, because in fact, that Marwa Declaration was rejected by the foreign minister of Gowan called Okoye Aribo. Remember it from Cross River.
From Cross River there. The great Okoye Aribo.
Definitely. And he didn't want to sign the communique.
Yes.
The second one also, when Shagari went to, you were around there, when Shagari went to Cameroon for another summit with the same Ahijo, remember there was controversy that after the issue was introduced over the Cameroonian gendarmes crossing to Nigeria and invading Nigerian territory, killing, that obviously when the issue was brought up, both of them started speaking in Fufudi.
Fufudi.
Yes, which annoyed, again, his foreign minister. Remember the professor? You know, the foreign minister of Nigeria under Shagari that time.
Shai Audu.
Definitely. And then, remember some of the delegates were not happy with how that conference ended, that summit. So somewhere along the line, the sabotage that made Southern Cameroon, Nigeria lose Southern Cameroon during the referendum of 1961 followed through to the end until we lost Bakassi.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm still requesting that we should continue. I'm not a problem. I can stay on.
One minute.
I want to follow protocols. Yes.
I know the problem is this. Hague was lost because Nigeria had no witness. The witness was hostile witness, that's Britain, because they had agreement that confirmed Bakassi as belonging to Nigeria, but they didn't ratify it, and they didn't come to be witness. And France
hostile witness
gave witness. Yes, that is how the matter ended.
Well, thank you very much. Most useful clarification. Yes, somebody else wanted to make a comment.
Yes, it's me, Hirse from Jos.
Oh, okay.
Just 1 minute. I want to plead with this.
Please go ahead.
Talking about Nigeria taking back its leadership role on the continent. I want to present a very simple recipe of food for thought. And that is the fact that you know that on the continent today, one of our major problems is political instability. And what is the cause of it? You have presidents, you have heads of states who, in accordance with their respective country's constitution, are supposed to serve a specific term. Before the tail end of their term, they disband the constitution, they disband the parliament, and want to succeed themselves. It is a major problem on the continent. I was faced with it when I was in office. I give you an example. Niger.
1 minute.
The man who was there, Professor Tanja, in accordance with the constitution, ended his term, but he disbanded this thing, and we told him, look, you cannot do it. The same thing is happening in Guinea-Conakry. I cannot believe that Alpha Conde, I need to meet IBB and remind IBB the role that we played. IBB was ECOWAS special envoy to Guinea-Conakry. Alpha Conde, who is in office today, he is trying to amend the constitution to succeed himself for a third term. The same thing with Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. But even the worst is Cameroon.
Yes.
Now look, I've said this because please, next time when we meet, there is need for Nigeria to play a leadership role in looking at the the AU Charter and the various regional bodies charter to see how we can deal with this problem. Ambassador Koyo Toyo, I think you were in Nairobi. I mean, you were in sorry, you were in Addis.
Prof.
I think you had a concurrent accreditation to both Addis and Ethiopia. So you will have to look at the charter of the AU. Please, we should see how we can play a leadership role there and see how the charter of both the AU and the regional bodies can be strengthened to ensure that this nonsense does not continue.
Thank you very much. Somebody was calling out to me.
Yes, Prof, it's me, Ayo.
I was.
Oh, okay.
Professor Pat, please, just a last word on
okay. Both you and Ambassador Ayo, look, can say one quick word. Yes, go ahead.
Mine will be half a second. On Ambazonia, the problem is now current and must be given urgent attention. If Nigeria sits aside and the people come from the Cameroon and pick up those refugees and take them back, they will slaughter them. That crisis in Ambazonia cannot return to where it was before. The English-speaking people have actually exited that country, and the crisis is deep. Nigeria needs to do something urgently. There is a move right now to pick up the refugees that are in Cross River State and forcibly take them back home. And I think our
conventions on refugee status.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Still on Ambazonia. Ambazonia.
Yes.
Yeah, there are moves to excise some territories of Nigeria. In some Nigerian local government are merged with the proposed state of Ambazonia. This does not seem to be receiving any attention from the Nigerian government and foreign policy community.
Yeah, we need to reorganize our foreign policy arena to be sensitive to some of these critical issues.
Yes.
Ambassador Ayo, look at me.
Well, just as a closing thought, and like I said, I do share my own practical experience. As Director General of NACIMA now, we are closely involved in some form of economic diplomacy because I was also involved in economic diplomacy during the Nwachukwu years. So what I've done is, against the background of my own experience, we are now in NACIMA, implementing some form of economic diplomacy. And how do we do this? We work closely with our missions to have business forum. And anytime we're having business forum, we invite our respective mission to link up to us. And we use technology to do that. And I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs also hopefully will be able to work on that in terms of working closely with us because the private sector is key. Look at the AFCTA, it's coming up now. We have Wankele, the Secretary General is now in. It's a reflection of the importance of Nigeria. The point I'm making is that in the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, we are making all effort to take advantage of economic diplomacy in close collaboration with our missions.
As you know, you and I were in Addis last year.
Yes.
I am president of PAFTRAC, the Pan-African Trade and Investment Committee of the African Union. And my personal biggest issue is essentially to have cross-border aggregation. We cannot compete in many cases because borders make aggregation for play at bigger levels across the continent in the global marketplace. Difficult.
We have to address the crisis and issues of the border closure.
We really have to deal with those. Just like in the Cameroon thing, we need to aggregate cocoa across the border, whether it's Ambazonia, with the one coming out of Cross River, to be able to be effective in creating the cocoa value chain that we can play in.
The toilet and brush.
So anyhow, these are critical issues that we must face, and we need our foreign policy to be more up to speed to deal with those kinds of issues. Right now, it is not. And that's why, if there's a trade link between the people of Cameroon and Nigeria such that they don't even know where the border is, the problems will be less. And this is really, really why...
West African Chambers of Commerce.
Yeah.
As part of the tools, which we can also use as well, which we
Okay,
are.
I guess we have to go. We're 30-something minutes past closing time. It's a fantastic evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself, but we got to go. And I thank you all so much. Godspeed to everyone.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you indeed, Excellence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you, sirs. Emma.
Okay,
Insightful and informative.
Sunday, how are you?
John, you've been sneezing and coughing persistently for the past 3 days.
Mary, I am tired. I don't know what else to take. I have taken all the cough syrups I can lay my hands on, and they are not just working.
Haven't you heard of Neophylline cough syrup?
Neophylline? Yes, Neophylline cough syrup provides fast relief for cough, cold and catarrh, and it's good for babies, children, and adults. Neophylline cough syrup, a product of Muson Pharmaceutical Limited, and is available in pharmacies nationwide. If symptoms persist after 3 days, please consult your doctor. Neophylline cough syrup, a quality product.
Thank you.